Episode 16. I took a deep breath and told him everything about Elvis, the video, and the blackmail. Akamefyana's expression darkened with each passing moment. "We'll figure something out, Ezen," he said, his voice firm. "But first, we need to tell Mom and Dad about this." I shook my head, feeling a wave of panic. "No, Akamefyana, we can't tell them. Elvis will release the video and ruin our family's reputation." Akamefyana's face set in determination. "We'll find another way, Ezen. We won't let Elvis bully you." "Not only that, Ikam, I think I'm pregnant," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. But before Akamefyana could respond, my mom burst into the room, a look of shock and surprise on her face. "You're pregnant?" she exclaimed, her voice firm but laced with concern. I nodded, feeling tears prick at the corners of my eyes. Akamefyana stood up, his face set in a determined expression. "Mom, we need to talk about this," he said, his voice calm and reassuring. But my mom's expression had already turned stern. "Who is responsible for this pregnancy?" "Akamefyana," I answered, my voice barely audible. "God forbid! You're pregnant for your brother?" my mom shouted, her voice echoing through the room. She looked like she had been struck by lightning, her face pale and shocked. Akamefyana's eyes were fixed on the floor, his expression a mixture of shame and guilt. "How could this have happened?" my mom asked, her voice trembling with rage and disappointment. "You two are siblings, for goodness sake!" My mom stormed out of the room, leaving Akamefyana and me in an uncomfortable silence. I could feel the weight of her anger and disappointment hanging in the air. "Akamefyana, what are we going to do?" I whispered, feeling tears prick at the corners of my eyes. Akamefyana shook his head, his eyes still fixed on the floor. "I don't know, Ezen, but we'll face whatever comes next together. But first, we need to stop Elvis and Greg from ruining our family's reputation." "Do you have the picture of Greg?" he demanded. I gave him my phone, and he transferred the image to his phone. A few hours later, Dad came back. The house was quiet. He entered, and my mom, who had heard him honk, stood at the door to welcome him. I stayed in my room, not wanting to stir up more trouble. Akamefyana, however, had left the room to greet him as well. As Dad settled into his favorite chair, Mom served him his favorite meal. The aroma of the food filled the room, but the tension in the air was palpable. After he took a few bites, Mom cleared her throat to speak. "Honey, we need to talk," she said, her voice laced with a mix of concern and anxiety. Dad looked up from his plate, sensing something was amiss. "What's wrong?" he asked, his brow furrowed with worry. Mom took a deep breath before breaking the news. "Ezen is pregnant," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "To who?" he asked in surprise. "Akamefyana," my mom answered. "Where is that girl?" he thundered, standing up and storming into my room. The only sound I heard next was a loud slap. Akamefyana had already locked his door, anticipating Dad's reaction. "You have brought disgrace to this family, and I will not forgive you," Dad shouted. My mom intervened, grabbing his hand as he raised it to strike me again. He stormed out of the room, leaving me in tears. I wept uncontrollably, thinking about my future, my life, my career. Everything seemed to be fading away. The peace in our family was gone. We now lived apart in the same house, with no one happy. I had refused to abort the pregnancy, despite their persuasion. But one day, my dad called me out and said, "You'd better get rid of this pregnancy, or I'll introduce you to an elderly man who desperately wants a child. You can marry him, give birth, and then leave the marriage." I reluctantly agreed. "Okay, Dad, I'll think about it." Akamefyana came to my room that day and tried to persuade me to have an abortion. But I refused. "I'd rather marry the old man," I told him. "The problem now is Elvis and Greg," I added. Akamefyana looked concerned. "You know Dad doesn't know that your classmates are aware of what's happening," he said. "Don't worry, I'll handle them," he reassured. To be continued. A story written by Anianai Okonkwo. All right reserved. Stay tuned for more episodes.